Hello people, welcome to the Rubin Report. I'm Justin Bieber's egg salesman, Dave Rubin. I've got Max Lugavere and Jack Moore with me, and of course, we have to start with the Bieber. This is clearly the most important news of the day. Cops, sheriffs showed up to Justin Bieber's compound. I'm calling it a compound, mansion, whatever you want to call it, because there was an egg incident, vandalism, eggs were thrown. There may have been as much as $20,000 worth of damage to Justin Bieber's neighbor's house. Anything over $950 would be a felony. The Bieber could be in trouble. Lil Za, I didn't know who he was, but apparently he's a rapper. Friend of Bieber, he got arrested. Might be coke, might be ecstasy, might be Xanax. Okay, so nobody wants to talk about this stuff. It's such nonsense, but it was literally the lead story on CNN.com. It was trending on Twitter, of course, all that stuff, and all the news organizations covering it. So I feel like that's worthy of talking about. How do we decide what should even be in the discussion? And what about the news organizations? Like, come on, CNN, really?
Like front page, I mean, that was the biggest headline of the day, really. Yeah, I mean, they're whoring for clicks, I guess. I mean, that's the only explanation, because it's really like, it's absurd that we are paying this much attention to like an egg throwing incident. You know, it's awful.
Yeah, now the irony isn't lost on me that of course I'm now talking about it, which just feeds the beast.
Didn't want to say.
Yes, well, I could see you in the head tilt that you were going, Dave, I know what you're doing here. But really, so for a regular news organization, I get you can touch on it, but literally when they're covering this as the lead story, now, you know, we're having some issues with NSA, have you heard about that? And Obamacare, and Iran says we surrendered. You know, so there's some other shit going down.
Well, there's also CNN in the Jeff Zucker world. Like, they've made a point that they're going to step away from kind of classical news in a lot of ways. They're trying to move more towards entertainment.
Yeah.
To position themselves better against MSNBC and Fox, which are kicking their asses over and over and over again for years. So I think we're still seeing, I mean, this is the same organization that dedicated like, what, nonstop coverage for like 4 days to the poop cruise.
The poop cruise, it was pretty bad.
Never forget, so, I'm sorry, hashtag never forget. But yeah, so I think it's not totally surprising, but at the same time, everybody is talking about it. Like, it's hard, it's a chicken.
It's a chicken and an egg.
What is the situation? Yeah, it's a chicken or the egg situation, but people are interested, and it is kind of an interesting, crazy story.
Yeah, like, it's completely nuts, and I'm not diminishing the ridiculous of it, and how many freaking eggs for $20,000 worth of damage. I know they obviously were free range.
I think that's the most ridiculous element of the story, is how did he do $20,000 worth of damage with a carton of eggs?
These people have.
Well, that's the thing. I guess they have really fancy windows and you know, stuff like that.
It's ridiculous. I think you were right to call Bieber's thing a compound, because I often think of him and Noriega in the same breath. But I can't imagine what the cops were looking for. Like, why do you need 12, a dozen detectives or whatever to come talk to him? What are you searching? Like, are you taking eggs out of the refrigerator and going, Mr. Bieber, what do we have here? Like, don't tell me your friends bought these for you.
That actually is a great point, because we always think that celebrities get special treatment as if it's better. But in this case, if I had egged my neighbor's house, I'm pretty sure 12 cops wouldn't have shown up and started searching my house. Because what is the evidence there? Look, I mean, are they looking for egg crates? They end up finding cocaine or ecstasy or Xanax.
Apparently, he's had altercations before with the police, and he doesn't usually comply. Like, he doesn't usually talk to the cops. So I think that, like, they were just trying, you know, he probably was, this was probably an instance of that, you know, where he was like not wanting to talk to them.
All right, well, I think we've given this story sort of the gravitas that it deserves, but shouldn't we expect this kind of stuff from rock stars? Like, what happened to the days when rock stars were allowed to trash rooms and destroy, you know, hotels and burn cows in airplanes and all kinds of fun stuff? What happened to that?
I don't think they used to live in these gated communities in Calabasas, though. Like, I think they would go and, like, you know, they'd live in cities, and like Sid and Nancy were staying at the Chelsea Hotel, and like, you know, like they did trash hotel rooms and stuff, but they also stopped, you know, now they live next to bankers, and bankers don't give a shit. Like, they have real money, and like real, like, money that will last beyond the time when they're cute. Like, I think Lil Zaz of the world are going to have a lot of Justin Bieber's money by the time it's all said and done. The entourage always seems to not go broke.
Yeah. Do you guys think celebs are having more breakdowns now, or it's just that now it's tweeted all the time? Like, it's live. We're live tweeting the stuff literally as it's happening. Sometimes before it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, an incident like this, I don't know if you should necessarily chalk it up to the fact that he is a rock star. I mean, he's still a kid, And you know, I grew up in New York City, and I definitely there were instances when I would, you know, bring out some eggs with friends of mine and throw them at buses, which is a fun thing to do.
Wow, well, we're going to send that to the proper authorities.
Exactly.
Lugavere,
yeah, but I think that's just part of growing up. You do stupid things and you learn from them. The problem with him is that he doesn't seem to be learning from the stupid things that he's doing.
I thought peeing in the slop bucket. I thought that was going to be his final one.
Right.
Yeah. So final thought on this. Charlie Sheen. I was thinking about Charlie Sheen with all this. Charlie Sheen's doing blow with hookers and had, you know, his whole tiger, what was tiger juice, tiger
you know
something.
What, though? Isn't it great that we don't remember?
Hallelujah!
How fucking wonderful is that?
I guess that's the point.
That is the win, is that we forgot what it was.
Yeah, but when you think about it, someone like Tiger, what do you think he thinks of this? Like, he's going, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to really do it. And you're egging someone's house.
Justin Bieber is sort of like the real life version of Blank Check. He's sort of like when a kid gets way too much money and is like, I'm gonna stay up all night and drink soda, and egg houses and hang out with guys with coke or ecstasy. Like, he's really mixing worlds, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, it is like the lamest version of superstardom ever. You can't imagine Justin Bieber
egging a house.
He just seems like Dennis the Menace, which is not cool. Like, he seems like he literally has his older neighbor being like, "You kid, get off my lawn!" Like, it's crazy.
Exactly. All right. Well, from one breaking scandal to another that sort of is a scandal and seems to maybe be getting bigger, even though no one knows if the guy knew about it in the first place. Chris Christie, of course, everyone knows what happened. They shut down some lanes in Fort Lee, New Jersey, on the way to the George Washington Bridge. It now turns out that it might have been political retribution for a mayor of Fort Lee who didn't endorse him when he was running for governor. He had the State of the State Union yesterday in New Jersey. Let's take a look.
Now, the last week has certainly tested this administration. Mistakes were clearly made, and as a result, we let down the people we're entrusted to serve. I know our citizens deserve better, much better. Now, I'm the governor, and I'm ultimately responsible for all that happens on my watch, both good and bad. Now, without a doubt, we will cooperate with all appropriate inquiries to ensure that this breach of trust does not happen again. But I also want to assure the people of New Jersey today that what has occurred does not define us or our state.
Okay, I have no great love for Chris Christie, but there is no actual smoking gun here. There were emails that implicated other people. He's now fired someone and already is doing the process that he's agreeing with the legal system to go ahead and deal with this. So I have no great love for the guy, but there is nothing pinning this on him specifically. So I don't know how much more the guy could do at this moment. If it turns out that everything he said in the press conference was not true, then he'll have to deal with that. But the guy fired somebody. There's nothing pinning him directly to it. So how much more do people want from him? I'm defending him. I can't believe I'm defending him.
But that's the thing is, I kind of want to defend him too. One, because it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Like, I realize that there were consequences to it, but there are consequences to everything that are unforeseen.
Absolutely.
And people driving, you never know what's going to happen.
Right. Supposedly there was an ambulance and a woman
couldn't
died.
Get through, a woman died, and that's obviously awful.
Yeah.
But it's also sort of badass to be like, oh, you know, I don't know. I weirdly find myself being like, that's kind of an awesome move. I hate to be on that side. I just remember and it's funny to me because liberals, of course, and I count myself among them. Yeah. Think of, for years, the West Wing was our refuge during the Bush administration. Right. We could for an hour a week pretend Jed Bartlett was president. And one of the funny moments of his re-election campaign is that they send the presidential motorcade through New York to keep the other guy, to tie up traffic so the other candidate can't get to an event. Yeah. And it's seen as oh man, our liberal heroes are so smart and funny. And now Chris Christie does it and everybody's like, what a bully. And it's yeah, that's kind of why I like Chris Christie a little bit. It's because he's a badass.
You know what? You totally hit where I wanted to go with this thing, because don't you feel like everyone does this? That doesn't diminish what he did, and especially if someone died, or that you shouldn't be doing political retribution. But are we to believe, do you not think that the Clintons have done this? If someone doesn't endorse you, then you go out and try to harm them. I'm not saying that's how it should be, but that's how it is.
Yeah, but I mean, it's part of the problem. And I do think the traffic on that bridge is already terrible, and like all the points that were raised about like emergency service vehicles not being able to get through. Yeah, I mean, that's really bad. I don't know. Like, I don't think there's any way to, or any reason necessarily to sugarcoat it. Like, bad is bad. You know?
Yeah, but if they can't pin it to him directly, if there's no proof, and in the next, because they're going to keep pushing this. Obviously, the media likes this story, and you can use all the fat puns, so everyone loves that. But like, if they can't really pin it on him, then we sort of have to give him a pass, right? He fired the woman that they could pin it on. Like, how much more can we ask them to do?
Yeah, but what else was he supposed to do? You know. Like,
well, that's my point.
Right.
That's my point. I'm not defending him, but the guy did. We always ask our leaders to take, acknowledge when something's gone wrong. He said, "This is my fault," even though I didn't know about it. I fired somebody. We keep saying that Obama, the NSA, he doesn't know exactly what was happening, or Obamacare, you can keep. I didn't know what was happening, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's exactly right. I think there's a good argument to be made that he really didn't know. I mean, because. Especially, what's so frustrating, I think part of why this story is taking hold is because liberals want to take down Chris Christie because he poses a threat in 2016. Yeah. And Republicans don't love him. And so they're sort of like, wait, can we get out from under Chris Christie? I mean, like, there's your fat pun, there it is.
Thank you.
But like, they see it as an opportunity. So there's nobody, like Glenn Beck is trashing Chris Christie. Like there's nobody. Usually this is the type of thing where Fox News would close ranks and talk about how the liberal media is attacking a Republican leader who we should, that's ridiculous. They do the same thing.
Right.
But instead, you have Glenn Beck being like, or Rudy Giuliani, who did defend Chris Christie, actually came out and sort of just like used the opportunity to defend Obama too, and was like, he probably didn't know what was going on with Benghazi or whatever, so you can't have it both ways. Either, Barack Obama doesn't know everything that happens in the country, which I'm betting he doesn't.
Right.
Or Chris Christie, he does, and Chris Christie is totally an evil mastermind.
Yeah.
You can't.
I totally agree. I mean, who would want to go into politics? When you see a story like this, when you see this kind of thing, let's just say for a second he's being honest and did not know. Nobody is in charge of, he's the guy's the head of the state. He's in charge of literally thousands of people. You don't know what everybody's doing. So who in their right mind would ever want to run for public office if everything that below you can be pinned on you? Doesn't it seem nuts? I mean, especially in a day when we can track everything.
Right.
Doesn't it seem nuts?
Yeah.
Do you want to run for office?
I don't. No, yeah, it sounds like a job that I would not want.
Yeah, I mean, really?
That's a question. I mean, like, who would want for a
because
host of
they
reasons?
Just take anyone down. They'll say, "Oh, well, your chief of staff did this 20 years ago," and
well, and it's that moment that is just awful in like every movie where like every bad indie movie where like some like good people find themselves in bad situations where like the crazy friend like brings a guy's head to his back, like, look what I did for you. Like I did this for you. It's like, oh my God, we're in trouble now. Like wait, I didn't want that. It's like your dog bringing you a dead bird and you're like, no, this is not a present. Like stop. Like, and now he's responsible because it just. For a host of reasons, one would not want to run. The fact that he's gotten this far, and the fact that anybody gets elected is a miracle to me.
Yeah.
But I don't understand the appeal of putting yourself at risk for 1,000 people who all want to show that they're the good soldier that's going to like do it for you.
Right, do it without even telling you. So final thought on this related to 2016, and you touched on this. Isn't this just all too early? If the goal here really was to just hurt the guy, they could have sat on this because now there's these other little scandals coming out, so it's like, when it rains, it pours kind of thing. But isn't all this too early? There's no way. We can't remember anything a week later, much less, this is way too early to do damage to the guy, really, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. We've got plenty of time, plenty of other scandals are going to happen between now and then, so. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's crazy when you think about even the last election. If you had looked at it 2 months out before Hurricane Sandy and stuff, the election was totally different. Yeah. If you had looked at 2008 before the economy tanked and McCain suspended his campaign, like if you had looked at that 2 months before the election, it was totally different than what happened at the end. None of this matters. It just doesn't. Just like Benghazi didn't destroy Hillary, this is not going to destroy Chris Christie. Like, this is all just gawking and something to fill our time with.
But we all agreed the eggs will destroy Bieber, right?
Oh, for sure.
The eggs have to destroy Bieber. Okay,
hopefully.
Let's move on. This is, I think, absolutely the biggest issue going on right now, and very few people are talking about it, unfortunately. Net neutrality, which basically means that the internet service providers have to give equal access to everything online. It has been struck down by a court. This is really quite terrible. So let's look at the definition of just a basic definition of what net neutrality is. So it's the principle that all sites on the internet will be equally accessible. So if you have Time Warner, let's say, for internet, they can't slow down sites that they're not affiliated with. So the DC Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in Verizon's favor. The court said that because the FCC had previously placed broadband internet service in a separate regulatory category from phone service, it lacked legal justification to impose the open internet rules. Okay, so that's a lot of mumbo jumbo. But basically, Verizon wants to be able to control, if you have Verizon as your internet provider, they want to give you access to their stuff and their partners faster than other stuff. I think this is huge. This is so horrible.
Yeah,
and net neutrality is so important. This is, I really think this and the NSA are like the two defining things of our generation. Why isn't this a bigger deal?
No, it should be, especially because like you just know that when this sort of power is put into the hands of conglomerates like Time Warner Cable, who I'm a subscriber to only because they're like a monopoly in my neighborhood, like they're totally gonna exploit it, you know, to the best of their ability. And I just think it's awful. It's terrible.
It is awful, but it's also shocking to me that the people who are making these decisions, these judges, these do they understand what's going? Like, I feel like it's the same. I have the same issue with it that I have whenever Congress gets involved in anything on the internet. It's like these people are like laugh at the guy who comes in to give them, because he's a nerd, who comes in to give them like information. I don't trust them to actually know the implications of what this means. I don't think these are people who are using the internet the same way that young people, or not even young people, like adults now, the next generation of people are using the internet. And it is, I mean, the one silver lining is that it's been said that Comcast, for instance, is going to continue, has committed to continuing net neutrality through 2018, which does give us time to potentially legislate or find other routes to net neutrality. It's just court decisions like this make that a lot harder.
Yeah, so isn't this one of those stories that it goes to what we started with here, the Bieber thing and the eggs? Like, that's the story that leads CNN.com the same day that net neutrality gets struck down, because it's too hard to explain. I think I did a pretty decent two-sentence job of it, but like you'd have to actually understand some technical things as opposed to eggs on a window. My God.
Well, the implications are that like a company like Time Warner could charge extra for HD YouTube streams or something like that, or like give slower access to shopping sites if they decided to launch their own, right?
Right.
Which is terrible.
No, it's all terrible.
Yeah, it's awful. And the fact that we don't have a marketplace right now where you have options, you kind of alluded to that, but like, it's not like I can leave Time Warner tomorrow and go to Cablevision because they're not out here.
Yeah,
but
so we're all Time Warner. Time Warner, me too.
Warner,
yeah, and we're stuck with them.
choice.
I think maybe I have an AT&T choice, which I've heard is really bad for internet.
Yeah, but there's no alternative.
And they already are terrible, in terms of customer service and things. Like I use them and I've had nothing but awful experiences with them.
Yeah,
and this would just turn the internet into cable TV, which is the problem, is that you can get a basic subscription that'll give you email and basic browsing. But then if you want Netflix, you have to pay this much. If you want, and nobody wants that. There's nobody but the conglomerates that want that. And this is another example of just nothing that is in the public's interest.
But yeah.
There's no regular human being who's like, I actually prefer my internet be like that. And if that's the case, if there's no human being who's like, this is a better option, why would we do that?
That's actually a great point. Doesn't that go to everything we talk about with politics all the time here, is that they're making all these decisions and the last people that are involved are actually the people. Nobody wants this. I have yet to hear anyone outside of this judge, basically, and Comcast and Time Warner, the people that are going to profit from it, say it's okay. Do you guys think we're going to look back on the 20 years, let's say, that the internet has really existed since, let's say, the late 90s when, was it Netscape started the whole thing or whatever it was, a Prodigy. Do you think we're going to look back on it as like the golden age of the internet, like we look back on the golden age of TV? Because now between this and the NSA, so now it's like we got people watching us and they're controlling how fast we can get stuff, that the first 20 years when we didn't know they were watching and before they could control the access, you think we're going to look back and think, wow, it was pretty good, the Wild West?
I do. I also, maybe I'm naive, I still have hope that it's just not going to happen. Like, I think, and maybe that's the wrong message to send. Maybe the message to send is like, this guy is falling, this guy is falling. Yeah. Like, let's, people of America, do something. Like, but I think that at the end of the day, I look at what happened with like SOPA, and nobody cared, and then at the last minute, everybody realized how bad it was, and Congress like got in line and did the right thing temporarily.
Right, and I'm sure that's probably going to be flipped too at some point. So sky is falling.
Yeah, but I do think that there's still time. Like I don't think it's over yet. Like, and maybe that's naive. Maybe I'm the guy. It's the bottom of the ninth and we're down 30 runs, and I'm like, we can still do it, guys. But you know,
right.
I don't know.
What do you think we'll look at it back as the golden age? Don't you see the winds of change?
I'm always. I tend to be optimistic. I think like, as is the case with most technologies, once the genie is out of the bottle, you can't easily put it back in. And so I think that like, if people are really dissatisfied, as I'm assuming they will be, I don't think that they'll let it happen.
Yeah, and I think the other kind of X factor in all this is, yes, there are corporations like Comcast and Time Warner and Verizon who want to end net neutrality, but Google doesn't, Facebook doesn't, 100%. And those are also giant companies with huge, I mean, Google specifically is also rolling out broadband in a lot of places. Yeah. And like that's going to change here in Los Angeles, like Google broadband is going to be a thing in a few years, and that's, could be like maybe the answer to this is Google ends up being like, all right, fuck you guys. Like, we'll be the internet. Like,
right. So there's your solution, people. We need an even bigger, giant corporation to save us. Google Fiber, which I think is just in Kansas and maybe Texas right now, has to come and save us. All right, let's talk about gay stuff, because it was a pretty good week already for the gays, and it's only Wednesday. Yesterday, a federal judge ruled that Oklahoma's gay marriage ban was unconstitutional. Let's take a look at a quote. Equal protection is at the very heart of our legal system and central to our consent to be governed. It is not a scarce commodity to be meted out begrudgingly or in short portions. Therefore, the majority view in Oklahoma must give way to individual constitutional rights. Now, he immediately stayed the decision, so gays can't get married immediately in Oklahoma. And already, a couple weeks ago, this happened in Utah. They had it temporarily. Now it looks like it's going to go to the Supreme Court. So, all right, I'm going to pretty much think we all agree that this is basically good, right? Gays, equality. Are we okay with equality?
Super against the gays.
Completely against the gays.
What do they? No, that's great.
Okay, so all right, so we're agreed on the equality thing. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Is there a risk in this all happening by judges? Are we just strengthening the resolve of the other side? Is the Tea Party, are those people just going to be more pissed because they're going to say it's not the will of the people, it's the activist judges that are giving the gays all this power?
I don't see that as being likely, no. I mean,
you don't think if you were a Tea Party guy and you were against these judges making decisions that this wouldn't strengthen your anger?
I mean, yeah, I guess potentially. I just can't wait until we get to a point where we don't have to celebrate common sense,
Trust me, I did not want to do this story. I can't wait till we don't have to do these stories.
I don't think that will be, and I mean, I think people will complain because people complain.
Yeah.
And so if you're losing, you're going to be like, this is not the way it should be done. Right. Let's do it a way where we win.
As if you'd be okay with it being done the other way.
Exactly,
right?
because we've seen cases where the people have voted in favor of gay marriage, and then the people are upset for other, there's always bitter losers.
Yeah.
But I think, one, equality in this country usually goes one way. It's very rare that rights are taken away from people continuously or for a long time. When they are, it's usually quickly reversed and outrage, and we're seeing that now with this issue. Mm-hmm. When Utah has judges being like, there are gay married people in Utah, there's going to be gay marriage in Utah.
Right.
It may not happen again tomorrow, but that's going to happen now, and it's not going to go back.
Right. So the people in Utah, for example, that are fighting it, I mean, don't they know that they're fighting a losing cause here? Because it's exactly what happened in California. There was the temporary okay, and now a couple thousand people in Utah are married, and they know that they're not going to get it back. So is it just that they just can't give up what they view as the righteous fight or whatever? You think it's just that they can't give up that religious fervor, that religious craziness?
I don't know. It is craziness. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope that they get it back.
I think they can't give up the fight because it is this thing they can go to church and feel like they're being holy or something. I don't know. I was raised Catholic, and one of the fact that for the first time ever, I'm like, hey, this Pope's not bad. Even that's moving in a good direction. So I do think I think in terms of judges too, equality in this country is always doled out by activist judges, like, you know, Brown versus the Board of Education, like it's all, you know, Roe v. Wade, like these are all, you know, decisions that have stood for a long time. That doesn't mean people won't try to overturn them, as we see with Roe v. Wade constantly, but, you know, that's how this works. That's their job too, is to be like, hey, you guys aren't protecting everybody, like we'll protect people.
Right, and isn't that also the irony of the people that they say they're so for the Constitution, but we have separation of powers, and if they believe in the Constitution, well then they should believe that if a judge says this is unconstitutional, even if they don't like it, they should abide by it, but somehow they don't always.
Why can't they also be on the side of the people when it comes to net neutrality?
Makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder. You know, so Governor Mary Fallin, who's the governor of Oklahoma, she said that the people of Oklahoma have spoken on the issue, noting that 75% of the voters supported traditional definition of marriage.
And I bet 60 years ago they supported 2 white people and 2 black people getting married. I mean, they didn't support the 2 black people getting married, really, but as long as they weren't marrying white people, it was better.
Yeah.
This is an issue where I don't trust the will of the people. Like, the fact is, there's a right, there is a wrong, and it is the government's job to make sure that all people are treated equally. And so if you have bigoted people in an area who are going to vote for something, and bigot is maybe a strong word, there are people with different, you know, blah, blah, but it is a bigoted stance. It's
right,
not,
at this point, well, because that's the other thing, and this will be the final thought on this, that for these people that are against it, every time there is gay marriage somewhere, none of the things they say are proven true. It doesn't cause straight people to get divorced or ruin families. It actually strengthens families. They've even done research that straight marriage is even strengthened in bizarre ways because you have healthier families and people, you know.
Surrounding you, yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think it's really great we got through this segment without making Rodgers and Hammerstein joke. Like, I think that is a real big success.
Trust me, I did every Oklahoma joke on Twitter already, and I felt I wouldn't belabor it with you guys. All right, let's move on. So this was big, and this happened this week also. President Obama said that he won't wait for Congress to push his legislative agenda through. This sort of goes to what we were just talking about, because we do have separation of powers, and Congress is supposed to make laws. The president's supposed to execute them, but that's really not what he's saying he's going to do here. He's going to use executive orders as much as possible. Here's exactly what he said. We are not just going to be waiting for legislation in order to make sure that we're providing Americans the kind of help that they need. I've got a pen and I've got a phone, and if I can use that pen to sign executive orders and take executive actions, and I've got a phone that allows me to convene Americans from every walk of life. Okay, that seems slightly problematic to me. Again, separation of powers. He's supposed to enact the laws, not write them. But he does have some leeway with this kind of stuff. And I'm not defending Congress. They don't do anything right. Their approval rate's at 7%. They hate the guy. They don't want to do anything with him. But isn't there a little danger in a president that's saying, I'm not going to wait for the rest of the system to work, and I'm just going to go ahead and do what I want to do?
Sounds kind of mavericky.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. This is why
sounds very Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, don't you think?
This is also why yes, idealistically, I totally agree.
I'm a dreamer.
Bad.
That's the thing.
Of course, but that's the problem, because that is the liberal idea, or ideal, is you kind of want things to work the way they're supposed to work. And I think that's why we always lose, is because the other side doesn't really care if things work that way. Like, I think a big complaint about President Obama's first term is that he tried very hard to do things the right way.
Right, and they said no every time.
Exactly. And I think when you look at how Bush and Cheney ran things, it was with kind of an iron fist, and I didn't like those decisions, so I really hated the means that they were gotten. But if those are now the rules of the game, Democrats can't get into the White House, lose at every legislative opportunity for 8 years, hand it back to the other side, and be like, okay, you guys destroy the country, and then we'll do our best to fix it the right way. You kind of have to. Otherwise, the pendulum has to swing the other way, or nothing. We're just going to keep going down a darker, smaller government, less protection path.
Right, but isn't there a risk in the pendulum swinging the other way, and then, let's say a Republican gets in that you don't agree with his agenda, and then he says, well, screw you, Congress, because Obama set the precedent. I'm going to do everything by executive order. So how do we negotiate how this should all work? Because you can't like it if it's your guy and then not like if it's the other guy, right? Or that's the principles thing you were talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, is that I think Obama hasn't set the precedent. I think this precedent had been set by the previous administration. And actually Obama, though has used a lot of executive orders, has not used them in quite as sweeping ways as Bush has. And I think this goes to a bigger issue with the Democratic Party being so bad at being Congress, at being in Congress, even when they had the majority, and even as a minority, they're just terrible at uniting behind a thing. Like because it's all like, oh no, the idealistic thing that nobody wants to compromise with each other in the Democratic Party. They'll compromise with the Republicans to get things done.
Yeah. But, well, we got a budget this week, right?
Exactly. But it's Democrats are really bad at coming together and making things happen. Republicans are really good at it. And so whatever way Democrats can move their agenda forward seems like it's going to be good, because the agenda is going to be coming back the other way next time around.
So is part of this problem, besides the sort of the specific things that you're talking about, that we sort of forget what is supposed to govern us? Like, I've now said the separation of powers 10 times, but like that we don't really spend any time really realizing that we have a branch that decides what's legal, a branch that's supposed to pass the laws, and a branch that's supposed to execute the laws. And so it really comes, to me, comes down to education. Like, if people really understood how the system's supposed to work, maybe we wouldn't have to deal with a lot of the nonsense that Jack's talking about, right? I mean, is this just an education thing?
No, it's a great point. And I think that people, I think, the Affordable Care Act has been like a really amazing, offering of Obama's campaign. But I think in general, a lot of people wish that he would have been able to accomplish more. And so I think 6 years in to say something like this, I think it's a positive. Well, I don't know if it's a positive thing necessarily, but I think that people kind of want to hear that from him.
Right. And also, he doesn't have to run for re-election. So at this point, maybe he's just putting the pedal to the metal and being like, "Screw you guys! I'm going to do whatever the hell I can get away with."
Well, I think you're right there, and I think that's actually the problem with the whole situation. Is if more congressmen didn't worry about re-election, if there were term limits that could make it that we had a lot of congressmen who were doing it for 2 terms and then getting out, or 3 terms and getting out, then I think you could see more movement in a good way. But everybody's so worried about protecting their seat that just nothing's going to get done. It's a balance between idealism and practicality. And the fact is, like, I want the idealistic version to work, but then we have to fix the system and like give incentive. Like, the incentives aren't aligned with our best interests.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We got one more about judges and the system. A federal judge denied preliminary approval of a $765 million settlement on NFL concussion claims. We've all seen the videos. We're just getting more and more of this. Guys can't remember things. Brett Favre, et cetera, et cetera. Let's look at some of the details. A younger retiree with Lou Gehrig's disease would get $5 million under the deal. Those with serious dementia cases would get $3 million. An 80-year-old with early dementia would get $25,000. That seems like nothing. Retirees without symptoms would get baseline screening and follow-up care if needed. The proposed settlement, by the way, which was negotiated over several months, is designed to last at least 65 years. So again, these videos are out. It's the playoffs right now. I'm watching this. It seems like the hits are getting worse and worse, but maybe it's just because we're getting sensitized to it now because everyone's talking about it. Is this crazy that even a $765 million deal was not enough in this judge's eyes to deal with this?
I mean, I think that the problems are real. A lot of these players are playing through injuries, which is part of the problem. They get diagnoses from doctors, of concussions and whatnot, and they continue to play. But I'm really concerned. I mean, I think it is a growing problem, and like you alluded to, I think that the injuries are getting worse. A really good friend of mine just did a documentary about traumatic brain injury, and it's an exploration of how the extreme sports, like it's getting so increasingly competitive, and like people are just pushing really their human bodies to the limits, and it's just becoming more and more dangerous. There was 2 weeks ago there was like a UFC fight, and I don't follow UFC at all, but one of the best fighters in the world or something completely shattered his all of the bones basically in his lower leg. And I just thought that it's like, I mean, how is this entertainment, like seeing people get so badly hurt?
All right, so we'll get to that part because I think that is a key part. But what do you think of the settlement in general, the judge's decision on the settlement? Does that just show you how bad this really is?
The judge's decision is awesome. It's hilarious.
Really? Yeah.
Ha ha, fuck the NFL. Like, this is, like, I love football. I watch it every week. I'm part of the problem. Yeah. But at the same time, this is a $9 billion industry. The $765 million is not for 65 years, the number of athletes the reason the judge just decided this was because that the amount settled on would not actually cover the things that they're covering, that they want to cover, because there are so many injuries. It's so prevalent. There's so many brain injuries that it's so prevalent that it's not going to be enough money, practically.
Did you know that Lou Gehrig's disease was even connected to this?
I actually did not realize that, and that's I think I mean, when you fuck with people's brains a lot, like bad things happen. Who knew?
Yeah.
And it's not. And the problem is, I mean, the NFL is trying to make the game safer. You know, targeting hits to the head. You know, there was Percy Harvin got crushed in that Saints game, and so he wasn't. You know, when that happens, you have to go out immediately and get a concussion screening. But then he came back after 10 minutes. You're supposed to be 15 minutes. You know, it's like
it's as if the 15 minutes.
Makes
because even if you didn't have a concussion, you maybe want to sit for more than 15 minutes.
And it's you know, and yes, they're getting better when you are diagnosed with a concussion. You have to sit out a game. You know, like so the NFL is doing what they can to improve. But I think the big thing is, the NFL will have to change in a fundamental way, and I think we're starting to see that, but I think it will continue. I think the game we watch in 10 years, or 10 years maybe, a game we watch in 20 years, if it's still a thing, will look very different.
Yeah.
And I think this settlement, the thing that bothers me about the settlement is everybody kind of agrees that it's not enough, and the lawyers who were on the player side were basically like, yeah, but if we go to court, it's really hard to prove. Like, even though we all know this is what's causing it, it's really hard to prove that this is why all these guys have it.
Yeah, so you hit on a bunch of stuff that I want to get on there. So first off, do you think that some of this maybe will be corrected by science? Because with stem cell research and all that kind of stuff, there is a chance that for all of the horrible things that are happening to these guys with dementia and all that, that maybe science will catch up and sort of mitigate some of the health issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think that science is working in parallel to find solutions for, these horrible diseases. I mean, Alzheimer's is set right now to be the world's next great epidemic. I mean, the numbers of people affected are going to triple by 2050. But I think that, like, traumatic brain injury is injury, and it's true that, they have pointed TBI, traumatic brain injury, to an increased incidence of things like Lou Gehrig's disease, which is like a terrible disease. And so I just think that I think it's messed up. I mean, I don't watch any sports, so I'm like an objective party, I think. I think it's just horrible to see.
You're more of a brain guy than a sports guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, pro brain. What would it take then for a sports guy like yourself? What would it take for you to actually stop watching? Because these discussions, ESPN's even been doing a little bit about this. Is there some magic number that actually would turn people away? Like if Brett Favre in 2 years from now, knock on wood, but if he really had,
I don't know, actually. Yeah. I think because Junior Seau, I thought was going to be the big change, because he was not, he was a young guy. He was someone that we all remember from not that long ago. He was an all-pro for years, and he tragically killed himself because he was dealing with these things. And yet nobody cared. I think two things. One, ESPN is doing a better job, but is also in a very strange position where they are a huge financial partner with the NFL.
Right. So they show you the top 10 plays, and 5 of them are crushing hits, and then they do a story on.
And then they pull out of stories too. They pulled out of the Frontline documentary about this after endorsing it. We don't know for sure, but it seems, and the word was because of pressure from the NFL not to do it, which compromises them as a journalistic enterprise, and they're the journalistic enterprise in sports. So that's a problem, is that the people that are supposed to be watching this, or at least one of the major players supposed to be watching this, is in bed with the person they're watching, which is a natural issue. I think the turning point, the thing that will change, and I think it's not impossible, is that somebody dies on the field. That'll be which is sad that you have to say somebody's got to die on the field, but that's going to be the thing that if that happens, and it is certainly within the realm of possibility, which already is terrifying. Yeah. I think that will be the thing that would change, would get people to really, the general public
to get off this. Do you think part of this has to do with that the amount of money the players make, even though NFL contracts are not guaranteed, but most of them are making millions and millions of dollars, that partly I think people maybe view this as, well, it's the risk you take to make millions. So there's a weird lack of sympathy just because of the salary they're bringing in. Does that jive with you? You think that makes sense?
I think that is what leads some of them to push through their injuries, and play when they shouldn't be playing. Yeah, I mean, money, there's no incentive quite like money, right?
Yeah.
It's tough because I actually think the NFL, I think that's actually the biggest problem, or I think it might be the biggest problem, is that the NFL potential career earnings for the average NFL player are much lower than the other sports because one, there are 55 players on a team as opposed to 25 in baseball or 12 in basketball. Yeah. Two, the contracts aren't guaranteed, so an injury means you stop getting paid potentially and certainly don't get another contract necessarily. And we focus on people like Adrian Peterson and you know Tom Brady, and they're making tons and millions of dollars. But the potential earning for a guy who's on the offensive line, who's a backup, who's going to make $500,000 a year for 5 years, but then never make that money ever again, and doesn't have maybe skills that are applicable to the career world, and gets hit with traumatic brain injury on top of that, can't afford the medical bills, the pension plan isn't great. Like you start to see that these aren't necessarily super rich guys. Some super rich guys are dealing with this, but there are also people that 10 years out, like they need, like, yeah, maybe they live in a nice house, but like they need to work at a car dealership.
Right, and not to be woe is me for guys that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but a lot of them haven't dealt with that kind of, I venture to say 99% of them haven't dealt with that kind of money beforehand. They get financial advisors involved that screw up all kinds of things, and all these guys end up broke. I mean, there's a zillion stories out of that.
For sure. Yeah, it's fascinating.
And it's such a quick turnaround, too. I mean, you look at it and one, they're paying tons of money to agents. Two, they're paying tons of money to their entourage because they're young and stupid. And by the time they get smart, a lot of them are out of the league, and it's too late. And that's what you see constantly. That ESPN, they're a good journalistic source in some ways. Did that great documentary called Broke about how it happens, and it's a mixture of being dumb, a mixture of their targets, and they're not necessarily like, yeah, they're really smart football players. But stereotypes exist for a reason. Like these guys aren't brain surgeons, and they're targets for smart people who want to take advantage of them. So when you throw in the fact that now they're 50, like the average age, the lifespan of an NFL player is like, the average age is like 65 or something. It's like ridiculously low, or maybe even younger than that. I've even seen numbers in the high 50s. But the fact that this is gladiators, like we're watching people kill themselves for our entertainment, and that is a problem. And it's getting safer, and that they're trying to make it safer, so you feel a little better about it, but then a hit like the one Percy Harvin took last weekend makes you remember, like, oh yeah, this is still really bad.
Yeah, well, nobody watches it because it's safe.
Right, you know? Right, and it really reminds me of hockey, which isn't doing particularly well in America. And if they took the fighting out of that, literally nobody would watch. So it's a layered problem. Anywho, that is our time for today. I hope we didn't give you brain damage during this. I hope maybe you learned a little something. We were all over the place. We got Bieber and eggs. We got the judicial system. We got some sports in there. Follow these guys, Max Lugavere, Jack Moore. Their Twitterers are right down below. And we will do this again next week. Thanks.